Okay, I got my little quarter size head, and I'm going to try and do skin transplant today. So I've got my titanium dioxide powder, which is what I use to bleach my wax or lighten, basically create an opaque wax. But this one was already mixed, but it didn't mix in properly, and so it's very hard to. It's sort of semi-translucent now, and it gets hard to see the shadows and see the form. So we're going to try experimental approach now. When you melt this wax with pigment, it all looks good. It mixes in and it melts in, and then as it dries, a lot of the pigment ends up going to the bottom, sinking to the bottom, and then you get this sediment. It doesn't mix in properly, and it's pretty annoying. You get this halfway house where it's got pigment in it, but it's not all. Oh, now the hair of this low quality brush is entering the skin. Yeah, so you get this halfway house where it's not blended in properly. This could completely fail, actually, but you know what they say, what doesn't kill you makes you more depressed and more deranged, so don't worry about it if you fail. That's easy to say though, when you are not the one who keeps failing. So if you keep failing at something, it's probably not going to be reasonable to keep a smile on the dial. If you care about what you're failing at. I mean, if it's ironing and you don't care about ironing, then don't worry if your ironing is bad. So now what I want to do really is get it kind of, I have a feeling this is not going to work. It's going to get all streaky. It's okay. I can't really make it worse because it was very splotchy, and the issue with this wax is that you buy the wax and it says brown wax, and they say, oh look, we put a color in it so that you can see the planes and you know, it can reflect light basically. But they don't put in, I don't know what they're putting in, but it's like whatever they're putting in isn't opaque. It's not an opaque pigment, some kind of browny thing. And and therefore the wax is actually still semi-translucent. So you get the wax, and then you've got to. I mean, you really have to add opaque pigment. So it's got to have. I mean, it doesn't have to have. This is why I bought the white, so that I can. If I just add this, it mixes with the brown pigment I've got in the brown wax, and you get like a light. You get sort of a. You get a little bit like a tan colour, which is okay. But if you buy a clear wax, then you have to add. I mean, you can make it pure white, but it can be a little difficult as well. So you want to add something else. So I really want to get some yellow oxide, I think, because not yellow oxide, yellow ochre, because that is semi opaque already. So what I'll probably do here is I will call this a makeup video doing foundation, and that way I'll get millions of views on it. Maybe that'd be awesome. I hope this titanium dioxide's not poison, because that would be. This could be my last video. Oh well. Goodbye, sweet world. No, I did check that it was not toxic, but I can't quite remember. I remember it wasn't toxic because I work with it with my hands, but well, I think we're getting somewhere, even if it's a bit marbled, but it's reflecting the light. Then we're getting somewhere. What would be ideal is if bees made opaque wax, and then they just made wax everywhere, like there were bees everywhere, and they just kept making wax, and then you could just walk down the park and just get wax there from the bees, and it's already mixed with some titanium dioxide, maybe. Well, they can synthesize that and give you great opaque wax. Maybe even a friendly bee comes up and says, "Hey, we've got some spare wax, come this way," and you just follow the bee, and they're not very fast. And then you go and get your wax, and it'll be. Doesn't that sound like a lovely world? We're all working together. Amazing. I mean, I'm not sure. I had some pumpkins this year, and I grew these big vines, but I got flowers on them, and I got melons, and I got flowers on them, and it wasn't my job to pollinate. It was the job of the bees, and I'm not even sure that they did their job. I feel like I've only got a few pumpkins, and I just feel like they didn't do their job. So I've got a few things to say about bees in the neighbourhood. Getting lazy. These bees. I mean, the pumpkin did its sort of job with the flowers and everything. Like the bee's supposed to see the flower and then come flying over, and bees love flowers. They think they're pretty. So this is a fairly simplified or minimalized head that I'm working on at quarter size. I just got a bunch of these types of things lying around, different levels of finish, and because sculpture is not my main thing, it's just something I'm trying to do on the side, and to assist some other things, but I actually think sculpture is the best of the visual arts, really, but it's I probably went through that before. I think when I started learning how costly the bronze casting was, it was a bit of a blow, a devastating blow, because bronze casting is very attractive when the idea of making your models in wax and casting them. Is a lot more appealing than some other aspects of. It's just every sculptural medium has its problems. I mean, but for doing figures, pretty much in any, or animals in any pose and so on, more or less, the casting gives you a lot of freedom, and you can replicate to a degree your piece. Yeah, hasn't. I thought I could get it on that surface, and then basically kind of rub it in fairly evenly, but it's not really doing that, and I might need to do a proper skin transplant and just put a layer over the top. It's a bit of a mess now. Bit of a mess. Let's see what I got over here. I might just rip one of these off. I might just do an actual skin transplant now. So you can see it even streaking inside. It's streaking inside that other stuff. This one was already mixed, but it's still got streaks in there. It's just one of those things, there's always technical problems. They say just melt the wax and add the pigment, it'll be good. It'll just all melt in, but it doesn't really work like that. necessarily. Sometimes some of the pigments, they don't cooperate. But the skin transplant, yes, it's actually this is going to work, I think. It'll work if I don't try and adjust the main bone structure too much. It will work. The smaller you get, the more choices you have to make how you're going to simplify some of these forms, particularly eyes, you know. I mean, you can just start to leave them out completely, just leave a bulge or something, or not even that, just have a socket at a certain point, depending on the style you're using. But yeah, at a certain, you know, you have to start making choices how much you're gonna, just like with drawing, painting, you can't represent well, I mean, you can get in there and try to do everything, even at a very small size, but at a certain point it's sort of futile. I notice a lot of the eyes a lot of eyes are oversized on European classical type sculpture, at least on the females, but even the males, in their earlier periods anyway. So the eyes and the eyelids are actually very big, and or you can basically some of the bronzes I've seen with heads around this size, they do have lids, but they sort of have just sort of gouged out. Sort of the eye is sort of gouged out. It looks like, and I can't be sure exactly how they did it. Oh, I've got a big streak there. So basically, it looks like it's just a rounded bulge, and then the eye is gouged out to leave the lids, but it's these are things that are hard to determine sometimes. There's a lot of information out there on the internet, but if you want specific things, you can be driven crazy looking for them. So yeah, it's just like drawing and painting, where when you're dealing with, it doesn't matter what size you're working at. That's why it's good always to know what size things are, because it changes how the level of detail and the simplification methods you might use on features. It's different sizes, you have to do different things, is my point. So we're getting the skin transplant. He's becoming more green, but That's okay. It's because the important thing is he's becoming more opaque, and that's what we love. I'm gonna get closer here, so I keep having to move it. Probably try and sit closer. So you can see now the light's really, it's coming off it. This wax is getting very. This is the soft one. This is the softer one, actually, which is this one's a little bit crumbly, which is a little bit doughy. The one that I got in bulk was the harder wax is just a little bit. Just feels once it's malleable, it just feels a bit better. It doesn't break up. Ooh, there's a big clump of. It doesn't really matter. This is just going to be a rough head, but oh, come on, big clump of my old friend titanium dioxide right on the mouth. So they actually put wax in plasticine. That's why it's and you can feel it when you're working on it, because when it's cold, it's like you move it and you can see it sort of it's like the wax, but this is just hard at the moment, but it goes because of the wax, it will become very soft and very unstable. I mean, it's softer obviously than the wax, because it's just got some wax and then some clay particles and some other stuff. But that's why the plasticine gives you, when it goes hard, it's actually, you can get pretty crisp. You can kind of half carve it and stuff. But then if you warm it up, either by working on it or the temperature gets warm, it just becomes really sloppy, really floppy kind of thing. I had some in summer here. It was on an armature and it just started. It was just sinking and it just got too warm, even just with the atmospheric temperature. So wax has a lot of advantages over everything. The main disadvantage, the prime disadvantage of wax really is that I guess you'd say it's the expense of it, because to buy it in the same bulk as clay or even oil clay or plasticine or wood or other things, it's just way more expensive for the volume. Maybe not for the weight, but it's very light, so for the volume it's very much more expensive. And then it's a little slower to work with than clay to a degree, but it's nowhere near like carving. It has a lot of advantage. I mean, it holds its own weight much better than clay and various stones. Wood is probably the next best. Well, I don't know, wood's probably better, but wood's you can't model with wood, obviously. Wax has a lot of advantages, but it's just to get, if you could dig it out of the ground like clay, and you can't. Wax is weird, because it's actually, it can last a long time if nobody melts it. It's fragile, but it'll just last. It won't doesn't do anything. The waxes are hundreds of years old, they still have, but it is fragile if you don't convert it into, basically if you don't cast it, mold it and cast it, so, or just bronze cast it. But yes, this is the properties has a lot of advantages. It's just that when you make something, and because you can model with it and then you can carve it as well. It's just, you can't win everything, Everything's got pros and cons with these materials, and nothing's perfect, and that's frustrating, because clay you can fire into terracotta, but clay's a nightmare to deal with in terms of holding its own weight on a small support, on legs, anything that's thin, and it dries, and then you have to manage that. It's very heavy. But you can fire it into terracotta, and that's a very good thing that it can do. Wood, or let's say a stone and wood carving, give you very pretty permanent sculptures, but stone carving is just I mean, it's so laborious, and also the materials, transporting the stuff, getting the good quality stone can be really hard, and it can also erode with certain conditions, certain stone. Wood is actually not so easy to get these days. You can't just go and cut stuff down like you used to be able to do. But wood has advantages as well. It's lighter than stone, so it supports its weight better. Easier to carve, but it has its problems with the grain, and problems with you've got to hollow it out, get rid of that. If you don't hollow it out, it cracks when it dries, and then so you have issues there. And then these little insects eat it. Over time, you're trying to preserve your piece of art throughout history, and these little evil things are eating it. So everything's got a problem. What you really want is something that can be modeled like wax, but is quite abundant, and you just have a magic wand, and then it, if you want, it just becomes permanent. It just becomes diamond strength. So we've basically opaqued this guy up now, and now that he's opaqued, I can actually correct the face and actually do it. Missed a part on the nose. Yeah, the society we live in now, it also just determines these things, because I really like the wood carving of these people in the Alps, Austrian, what is it, Val Gardena, and sort of like Italian or Austrian carvers up there. But they have all this, they have abundant resources of this pine that's quite good for carving, so if you don't have that, it's a little more difficult to do that, because now you've got to access that timber, and you can glue planks together. That's one thing people do. But anyway, I mean, carving these days is, you just don't get paid for your effort. due to mass production. There are still people that make a living doing sculptures and so on in those regions, but they definitely don't get what they would have in the past, I think. I mean, if you look at the kind of things they're producing, and it's pretty sickening how they probably make less than sure they make less than some kind of civil servant, maybe, oh god, I'm not even going to think about it. By the hour they'd make less than janitor, I'm sure. Oh yeah. You are now becoming opaque. You will now follow the laws of light, and it will bounce off you. Well, you could argue the laws of light include translucent things, but a fleshly creature must have light reflected. Turn this. Shining a bit, and the wax is always, it's not quite as nice as clay or wood, in terms of, you get a really nice flat bounce off of those reflection. But we just wanted to do a nice skin transplant and get him ready. Okay, that's about it.